Listen up. There's no more excuses.
We're empowering those who want the hustle by exposing the status quo.
The days of ordinary are over.
It's time to crush mediocrity and start discovering your greatest potential.
Welcome to the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle Nation. To the Hustle.
Welcome back to another episode of the Hustle Nation podcast. Today, we're going to talk about the power of organization and why it's just so important to success. So, Dustin, you and I talk a lot about this. We really believe that organization is one of the most critical components to success. And as you look at some of the most successful people in the world, these are all people who are highly organized for the most part, or have people to help them with their organization. You have a great story. And mine is very much the same, of how you went from unorganized to semi-organized to highly organized. Let's dive into that.
Yeah. So, by nature, I'm a very disorganized person. If you were to talk to any of my teachers when I was growing up, I certainly was not the model of organization. And as I was growing in my career, spending a lot of time on things, I could kind of get away from still being disorganized. I could just kind of outwork my disorganization and make it work. And as I shared, there was a point in my life where I just broke. Basically, I from the outside in, it looked good. I was the new CEO, and things looked to be really good. But I was actually breaking. I was 80 plus hours a week, health deteriorating, relationships falling apart, and trying to take over this organization and how do we move it forward? And because I broke, I started to search for how do I solve for this? Because I need to find a way to get more done, because I didn't have any more time anymore. And so I went on a kind of a quest to try to find the answer. And so I started with kind of the cheap way, right? I went on the Apple store, the App Store, and tried to find all the productivity apps and all that sort of stuff, and which ones I could do, and downloaded a bunch of them, was going to try a bunch of them and all that sort of stuff. And I was fortunate that I actually, I came across, not on the App Store, but a guy named David Allen, who has written a book, Getting Things Done, that was tremendous influence on me. And what he really talks about is, what really is organization, and how our brains by nature are disorganized. And so what he talks about is, if you've ever been in a call it a Zen state, right, where people will call it the flow or whatever, where you're able to just tackle stuff and nail it. Well, the reason you're able to do that is because you're uniquely positioned mentally and physically and with the right information to tackle exactly what it is you're trying to tackle. And that's why it feels so easy. But our brains are typically not set up this way. So if you think about if you have any kids, right, and your kids have batteries that they need for their toys, when do you think about when you need new batteries for the toys? You think about it when you're staring over to the toy with a broken battery. You don't think about it as you just walk past the aisle of batteries in the store 2 hours earlier. And it's because our brains don't think of it that way. And a great way that he really shared about it is just think about everything in your brain that you're thinking about right now, that it is at least the second time you've thought about it. And if it's at least the second time you've thought about it, it means that you don't have a process to actually take action on the thoughts that you have and the inputs that you have. And that every single one of those is a wasted action. And when you talk to people about that, they're like, oh my God, I think about this thing 17 times a day, every day, but I still don't do it. And it's like, the reason you keep thinking about it is because it's an open loop. It's an open loop that you haven't taken action on. And you're supposed to do it, but you might not know how to do it. You might not know what the clear next step is, but there's something that's preventing you from taking that action, or it may not be in a process to which you organize. And so, I kind of went down this path I'm kind of a techie person. So I really thought about, all right, I'm going to do this all technologically, and it failed miserably. And I realized now why that was, but I didn't realize it at the time. And because really there's a lot of science to the fact of handwriting things down. Actually, there's scientific fact that it imprints in your brain differently, because you're actually using the physical state You're having to think about it. You're having to think about what you're going to write, and you actually have to write it. And so that physical state of actually writing something down helped a lot. And so at this stage, I was trying to grow the business, and I had, like, as an example, I had a prospect list that I had digitally forever. But once I had to write that down on a daily basis, all of a sudden I was able to do it more because it was even more hardwired into my brain. And so then how does this kind of fit into organization? Well, if you have an organizational process that allows you to take all of the inputs, because we all have more inputs coming at us than we could possibly handle. That can come from just your brain, things you're thinking about. It can come from your email. It can come from text messages, it can come from calls. It can come from a coworker, come from a spouse, come from a friend, come from TV, online, social media, wherever, right? Like, inputs come from everywhere. But if we don't have a way to capture them, identify what do we need to do with them, and then where do we go from there, we're never going to get out of the loop. And so to me, that was kind of the revelation of like, okay, so now how do I build that process? And so then from that, I knew I needed to build it into a written process that I could tackle every day, which ultimately kind of led us down to our planner.
Yeah, I think about this a lot because I've come a long way in my organizational skills as well. And it seems to me when I talk about it, much like reading, people resist organization. And I'm just curious, what are the easy ways people can ease into this? And maybe it's helpful to talk about the benefits first, because I feel like if people really knew how being organized, not just physically, but also mentally, can benefit their life, I think more people would be willing to do it.
So the easiest way in my mind, and obviously we have our hustle planner, which we'll talk here a little bit about. Whether to use the hustle planner or a different planner, it's obviously your choice. There are plenty of good planners out there. The hustle planner was designed for a very specific reason, but one of the things that we've seen is one of the easiest steps is if you start by having a planner and writing in it just every day. There's already a structure there. There's already steps there. It is, and you're going to fall down, by the way. You will always fall down. I still fall down, right? I mean, we created the planner and I still fall down, right? But what do we know? We know that what are some of the most productive people in the world doing? So as I was, talking about my story about like the shift that I made, part of the reason, so, I obviously started with not building our own planner, right? I started by just using other people's planners. And why did I start there? Well, I started because as I started to look at the most productive 1% of the world, what were some of the behaviors that they follow that maybe I wasn't following? One of them was they plan their day the night before. Like, that's a very common high-performing individual structure. They plan the next day the night before. You can do that 100 different ways. You don't need a planner necessarily to do that. It just makes it easier. And so I just, that was actually how I started. I was like, I'm just going to get some sort of calendar planner book. I don't even know which one it was, but I grabbed one because it's like, hey, this is going to allow me to plan my day tomorrow. And what I found is just over time, a lot of them are very list orientated, not necessarily leveraged orientated, meaning that they kind of lay out a calendar. They lay out the days. Here are the things that I'm saying I'm going to do that day, which is in of itself helpful, but it doesn't tie to your vision. It doesn't tie to your goals. It doesn't tie to behaviors, and it doesn't tie to what are the most impactful things that you do. Because what we know is you can make a list of 20 things, and there might be 16 of them that you could completely ignore and nothing bad's going to happen, but 4 are going to really advance you forward. And so it's to me, that's been the value of and then you also have the benefit of organization. So what happens when you have a list of stuff? Because we all have a list of stuff to do. Well, if you haven't prioritized it, then you're not doing your most leveraged work. And 2, if you don't have it in a system that you can go back to, you're going to have to keep rethinking about these things. And you're going to miss stuff, or 2, you're going to have to basically re-identify that thing, right? Which is just going to create that wasted space. Versus if you can kind of free your mind to say, I'm clear of all that junk. I know exactly what I need to do today. I've taken the few minutes the night before to actually think about what would make tomorrow a successful day. write it down so it's imprinted in my brain. And then, by the way, if you've done this before, you'll know by the morning, you will forget what you wrote down. You will absolutely forget what you wrote down.
Yeah.
But the beauty is now your day becomes so freaking easy because you've already committed to it. You've laid it out. You've scheduled it out. You know exactly what your clear next steps are. You know exactly what you need to do. And so you don't need to rethink about it in the morning, because that's what most people screw up is they plan for their day the morning of. One, the reason high performing people don't do this, you're already starting the day late. Two, you're usually your brain isn't programmed right to capture all the open loops because you're just kind of getting the engine rolling. The end of the day is a great time to catch all those open loops because that's usually when, this is why people a lot of times can't sleep, because their mind is racing. Why is their mind racing? Because they have all the open loops. You have an organization process where you can capture all those open loops. You can sleep, you can relax because you know it's going to be there in a trusted system the next morning.
Justin, you bring up something that comes to mind quite a bit. I used to think when I first got married, I was a pretty forgetful person. And it turns out I just had a lot of open loops. And this is before the daily planner stuff. And I used to tell my wife, if it's out of sight, it's out of mind. That was kind of like an excuse I had. And so I got good at writing things down. I got good at putting things in a journal or a planner over time. And I realized one time, like, I don't want to be forgetful. I don't want to be that guy. And I feel like that's just bullshit for not having priorities. And turns out it was right. And I think about the benefits now. So if you're listening to this, you're like, oh, daily planner, that's an old way of doing things. It's actually not, because there are, as you mentioned, many benefits and many reasons why using your iOS or Google Calendar isn't good enough, right? It can't do what a daily planner can do. And so there are a couple things that you should really know, you should think about here is, number one, you will gain mental clarity. Number two, you will see a big reduction in stress and anxiety because you're more productive. If you are more productive, there's fewer open loops. Things tend to not slip through the cracks as much. We're not perfect. There's things are going to happen, right? And at the end of the day, if you are in that hamster wheel, as we've talked about before, you're stuck working in the business. You just can't do the things to work on it, as you mentioned, Alex Hormozy. But you want that. The daily planner is going to be that pivot. It's going to be that new habit, that new behavior, as we talked about in the previous episode. And it's really just a tool. It's just a very simple tool that at the end of the day, much like reading, it only takes a few minutes a day. It really does. And it's so small, you can fit it in any bag. There's almost no reason not to have it. And I'll say this, if you are more productive, if you have less stress and anxiety, what does that mean for you as a human being? Do you think you're going to come home and be your best self? Bring your best self home to your spouse and to your kids? Yes. Do you think when you pick up the phone, when your mom calls, your brother calls, that you're going to be your best self? Yes, because you're in a better place physically and mentally. And guess what? If that one next thing for you is, I got to get back in shape. I want to run a 10K or a half marathon. Do you think you're going to be in a better place mentally to go do that? Yeah, you're going to make the damn time because you're feeling good about being Mr. or Miss Productive. And you're going to say, you know what? I'm going to commit to that. It's really not that big of a deal. Your mindset is going to shift. And I think you'll look back and say, a daily planner did that? That's right. A daily planner did that.
There's the old adage that people say, a minute of planning saves 10 minutes of work, which I think is way understated, by the way. Because to your point, when I look at the time, energy, and effort that I have saved in to your point, when you first do it, it maybe takes 10 minutes. But then as you get rolling, it doesn't even, it rarely takes me 10 minutes from night to night to plan out the next day, because it just becomes so clear because everything is aligned and everything is structured. And again, that doesn't mean that there's not a grenade that gets thrown into my day from time to time. But the beauty is because it's organized, all it's doing is moving little things, and it's moving it maybe in the afternoon or maybe a day or maybe 2 days later. Nobody even noticed. I'm the only one that notices, right? Versus when you lack that organizational process, you don't even, maybe you're missing it. Maybe you're rethinking of it 17 times, or maybe you didn't even know you missed it.
Yeah. The last point I want to make is I've also heard a few people say to me, well, Chris, I'm organized enough. I am organized. And there's a case to be made for that. And you might be successful. You might even be as successful as you want to be. But we all know that if we do things correctly, if we try to optimize our life or our career, that there's always room for optimization. And so wherever you are, if you're saying I'm organized enough and you're not using a planner, you're not using a tool like we've mentioned, I still think that there's room for optimization with your mindset. There's room for optimization in your life in a wide variety of ways. And there's just not a lot of people using a true daily planner. There's not a lot of people who are prioritizing their goals and their habits, or crafting new goals and habits to get to where they want to go. And this is, to me, it's been my vehicle for success. I know it's been your vehicle. And sometimes you just have to find the right daily planner out there. Ours may or may not be the right one, but I think that if any of this resonates with you, you can find a copy of the Hustle Daily Planner on Amazon. We will link that in the show notes below. If you're interested and maybe you're just catching this episode and you're like, what is that 2020 vision guide? There are plenty of links below in the show notes to go get that. I would recommend doing that first, because the Hustle Daily Planner is a way to actually bring that to life. It's the vehicle to help you get from point A to point B. And hopefully for you, there's a point C and D and so on beyond that. So thanks so much. Thanks for tuning in to another episode. We appreciate the ears. Until next time, peace.
Thank you for being part of the Hustle Nation. If you're serious about raising the bar in your personal and professional life and willing to go all in on your success, head over to hustleleaders.com. Here you can get access to our Hustle Productivity ebook, attend our Hustle Masterclass, or challenge yourself to the 30-day Hustle Challenge. Pairing these tools and training with the Hustle Nation podcast will help you advance to a whole new level. Until next time, stay hungry and inspire those around you to hustle.